the practitioners, the artists, with a panel on artistic practices and social bonds. So we will start with the practice, and then let me introduce Otubang here from Nigeria, but who is an artist based in Belgium, in Antwerp. He's a visual artist, a photographer. He is a performer as well, and is present on scene, interested in architecture, social practices and geographies, how territories are connected, and the various worlds and continents. He will talk in his introduction about platform of encounters from Lanversation to covered floor.
Okay, thank you. Merci. I hope everybody can hear me. Yes. Je peux parler en français, mais...
I can speak in French, but most of the time, to be more precise, I prefer English. Sometimes, if I don't find the right words, I can switch languages.
The invisible workers that are behind us, the people that clean up our rooms, the people that, the taxi men, all the people that are working around here. I'd like to especially thank Felwin Sarr. We've been in conversation once in a while. And Achille and Mbembe, who I've just met here, and it's a great pleasure. And also everybody that I've met gradually, plus the team that have worked so hard to make this happen. I'm really grateful, and I'm happy to be here on my continent, which I haven't been on since 2018. So it's a very important moment and a very spiritual moment to be here. And I think it was very important to be able to give the stone something that we share together. So I would like everybody to just lift up their hands together, and I would like us to roll the stone in our hands. Roll it, roll it, roll it, roll it, fill it, fill it, fill it, fill it. Let the blood flow, let the blood flow, let the blood flow, let the body shake, let the body shake, let the body shake. Roll it, take it down to the in between your arms. Roll it, roll it, roll it. You feel that, 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 you feel that. Yes, 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 yes. It's popping, it's popping, it's popping. The blood is flowing, it's flowing. Now take it down to your chest. Rub it, rub it, rub it, rub it, rub it, rub it. Down to the stomach. Yeah, that's the other brain, the other thing that is making, we might be hungry. Have you eaten this morning? Have you eaten this morning? Is your belly full? Are you full? Are you hungry? You're not hungry? Now rub it. Rub it. Now your legs, put it up, put it up. Now rub it, rub it, rub it, rub it. Do you feel that? Rub it. Now I want that energy flowing. I want the blood flowing. I want the body moving. Yes. You feel that? You feel that? You feel that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not over. Now to your toes if you can. Rub it slowly. Bring the stone up your body. Rub it slowly, slowly. Rub it up to your hands again. Bring it here. Slowly rub it. Rub it, rub it, rub it. Yeah, are you alive? We can talk now? We can talk now? So we could be allies, can't we? Yes, we could be allies. I could graft myself to you, blend to look like you, hide underneath each layer so I can be close to you. If we share our fears, exchange our fluids, quietly seal the deal, we could be allies against all odds. I can poison your rods and your roots, suffocate your lungs. I will leave you hollow so I can thrive without you. If I connect to you, if I am consumed by you, if I crumble with you, then what do we call us? What can we become? I will start with a stone. And it's a way of understanding place. So what I did with the chapter or the title of this talk was to think of a place where we can encounter, where we can meet. What kind of platforms do we create for encounters? And not just an encounter with you, or with you, or you, or you, or you, but also an encounter with like an element like this. I will fill this element with a story. And that story, you continue the story in the future. It doesn't stop here. It's a moment we will be sharing together with each other's stones. We could even exchange it if we want. We could throw it at someone. We could put it on a table. We could put it underneath our pillows. But what I would like to say is that I was interested in thinking, what kind of life form could we find by the beachside? So I asked Ami yesterday, like I would need to get something I need stones. And it seemed quite a thing to think about because this is a sandy region. And from what I understood, that a lot of the stones were taken from the sea beachside or by the sand and used for building. So that has become something that is illegal to do. But yesterday, Ibu Sal went and picked all the stones you have in your hands. He picked over 200 stones. And later on, this morning at 5 o'clock, I spent time with the stones, washed each one, and talked to each stone and profuse love. So as you're holding the stone, you know that it's not just a stone. It's connected to Senegal. It's connected to legal things. It's connected to extractions. It's connected to love. It's connected to our stories shared together. It's connected to possible futures. And I'm interested in that space of thinking about an object, an element that comes from a place and how it disperses into other places, how it becomes something of power and how it loses its power. So I would like to introduce to you my first work called Landversation. Please, can we turn it on? I'll still continue. Landversation. I think about land and I think about conversations. How do you enter a place? How do you start a conversation? How do people meet? The first time I did the project Landversation was in Sao Paulo. And in Sao Paulo, I was very much interested in thinking about how do people live in this area? How do the different histories coming from Africa, coming from Americas, coming from Asia, and when we think of Sao Paulo, it's a place filled with people from Japan, and you have the culture there. The Africans that were taken from the different countries and different nation states that were there, plus new people that have come in, and plus also Europeans. So it's a kind of pot where people come together. And I thought that it would be interesting to be able to start a conversation from a place like Sao Paulo. I was interested in people that live on the streets, landless people, homeless people and landless people, which are two different things, to people that are thinking of geographies, minds, landscapes, people that are struggling against oppression, to people that are farmers, people with permaculture and doing permaculture, people that are thinking about the water bodies in the city, all the people that are working in the fringes where the governments do not actually look, but they're actually working for the society and finding ways how to heal the society. What interested me was the guy that would work with water and would tell the homeless people where to drink clean water. And so a homeless lady would be able to know the difference between clean and sewage water. And so it was a very interesting way of understanding how to connect to a landscape and how to work within a landscape. And at the same time, me coming in as someone that does not know to learn, and to understand how to enter a place and how to be. The work has gone to Beirut, and in Beirut we did the same thing, understanding, but this time we worked with about 30 people from different extremes. So someone that is an organic farmer, to someone that is working with chemicals for farming, to someone that is really thinking about the sewage systems, to someone that is really reflecting on healing processes within an environment, to an architect, to lawyers, to understand how the laws are being unfair to certain groups of people. And the work went to Shanghai as a way of also having a conversation in a place where there are about a huge amount of people, almost 24 million or 28 million living in one city and really crowded. And how do you bring all this, how do you govern a place like that? And how are people finding ways to work within a system that is censored, which language is censored? So even when we had to write something, we had to find ways of putting the language so that it does not seem that you're attacking the government. So I'm interested in ways in which we can find platforms in which we can discuss, in which we can talk. Within the continent, it's somewhere that, for example, in Nigeria, we are working a lot as a foundation to be able to think about soil. And I'm interested in that idea of how do we, from the soil, that's the thing that affects everything that we are. The food that we eat, the water that we drink, the plants that we can grow, how we affect that. And so with Carve to Flow, I know the time is so short, so the projects are so big that it's so hard to compress it in 15 minutes. Please let me know if I have enough time. Thank you. And so with Carve to Flow, after Landversation, I realized that we were having many conversations, but how can one really work? And who can be the allies that we work with? And what kind of structures can we put in place for things to work? So when I was invited to Documenta 14 in 2017, I decided, also with a group of artists, a group of botanists, a curator, writer, different people that were thinking around circular economy, thinking around indigenous practices, thinking around just the economy, and also lawyers, on how can one create a structure, a support structure that can work across geographies. So the first thing in Documenta was to be able to have, we were invited to two different places to do an exhibition. The first was in Athens in Greece, and the second was in Kassel. I was interested in the statistics and interested in the kinds of what those places offered. After Landversation, you get more astute at seeing what a place can offer and how to work with people, and also how to create platforms that allow for this cross knowledges and for this expansion of knowledge and on learning different ways of being and making. So in Athens, we made 15,000 black soaps. Why Athens? Or why the soap? Athens, or let's say Greece, the Mediterranean, produces olive oil. But at the same time, you had the sea and the waters there, that we have lots of migrants, people coming in or from different parts of the continent and also from the Middle East. But I was interested in understanding, why is it that our lands that nourish the world, the whole world, why is it the same places that are being so charred? Why is it the same places that we're trying to breathe, that everything is a bit more contrived? Why is it that it's the same places that are nourishing are the same places that are being bombed, the same places that are being hit, the same places that are being strangled, suffocated? And so I made a sculptural work, which was a black soap, that contained the 7 oils and butters that come from the region, the Middle East, North Africa, West Africa, and the Mediterranean. We also have to see in Europe, you also had the crisis in Greece, in Italy, and the world crisis in 2008, which extends even further till today with Corona and with also the different wars that have been happening and the displacement of people. So this soap contains those oils that nourish the world, but at the same time contains charcoal. And when we think of charcoal, charcoal is made in the absence of oxygen. And it was important to have something that is contradictory in one form, but at the same time to create something that will melt away. So as you wash your body, you're washing away this thing that is so solid, that becomes that enters the streams and disappears. And it's a way of cleansing through multiple bodies, through multiple people, that kind of thought of the wash away of things. In Castle, normally Documenta in Castle is 15, how do you say, it's okay. There are about 1 million people that come to see the exhibition, and it lasts 100 days. So with that, I thought it would be a great platform to be able to sell the 15,000 soaps, but through performance. That means when you have an element like this, the person cannot buy it, but only through a conversation. Through that conversation, you would understand what the object is, what it means, what it's meant to do. And through that, you can pay for it and pay for the labor of the person that is working. And through that money, it goes into opening a space in the place that the oils were extracted from. So in Greece, we've opened an art space, and in Nigeria, the foundation. But at the same time, it's a tool. The work is a tool to be able to understand how to work or options of working. And it enters into museums, into art spaces. We were here in Dakar in 2018 as an academy with Raw Academy, a raw material company here in Dakar. So it's a way of thinking that the work can slide through spaces, can be in multiple forms, and there's no way of censoring it. It can enter any kind of geography and find a way of installing itself. But it has to be a support structure. It has to be a way of understanding, or a way of supporting something else. One of my main core, or the main thing that structured the way of thinking was the Musgum architecture in Cameroon. And that for me has been one of the founding ways of thinking of this work. When you think of the structure that is built with earth, and it's like a voûte, and then you have a wall and another chamber and another chamber. I was looking for something that even if you destroy one part of it, it does not destroy the whole. And that means that that part that you've destroyed allows for another possibility. Unlike when I looked at neoclassic architecture, Greek architecture, I was looking at all these different architectures, and I was like, well, if you break a pillar, everything wobbles. And when you see what happens in Europe with Brexit, with everything that's been, Europe wobbles. Europe is wobbling. And for me, that African architecture has been the core of my thinking process, that even if something is erased, even if something is taken out, we have a structure, we have multiple chambers in which we can redesign, we can restructure, and we can rethink. And so that architectural structure has been that foundation of my thought and of my process of working. So in Nigeria, what are we doing? In Nigeria, we are working a lot with, we've got a land in which we are testing out soil. We're looking at ways in which we can find symbiotic ways in which plants work together to be able to regenerate soil constantly. So a lot of the young farmers, or a lot of farmers, work on the land, but a lot of times the land is used up till it's fallow, till it's left fallow. And then you look for another land, and you look for another land. So how do you regenerate soil in a way that it can be regenerated quite quickly? You create structures that allows for a constant cycle in which things can be grown, the soil can be regenerated, food can be produced. But also thinking about our problem of movement from the north to the south, and the problems that are going on in Nigeria with all the violence that is going on, also all the movements of the movements of goods that are becoming very difficult, the roads that are not good. So we're thinking of all these ways of how do you create satellites of places where you can plant specific things that can be in regions that they are not planted. So you don't have to think of movements of the plants, of the goods. And also, how do you train young ones to start recognizing, like a neem tree, dogonyaro tree? How do you recognize what bitter leaf does for you? Bitter cola, all the things that we have that are antibiotics, antiseptics, things that are giving energy, things that you drink when you have malaria, all these things. How do you go back to the herbal to understand the landscape of things, not negating what is there, but to add to what is there? So I will finish up with one thing because I've only got 2 minutes left. And I hope that I've been able to just give a very compressed idea of the different projects that are happening in different places. But to end it off, I will read one of my poems. The other one was one of my poems. This is the last poem I will read. And it's called As It Trickles Down. The rock whispers to the stone, "You are an error." The stone pounds the grainy sands, building rhythms of terror. The sand cries out to the trail of dust, "Stop the horror!" The cloud of dust mingles with the cushion of air, dancing to its beat with vigor. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Olabong, for this presentation. That is presenting your work, but also some of the performances you do. And this work that is at the juncture of many fields, territories, and that connects us to our environment as human beings. Now I'd like to introduce an artist that comes from the DRC, Faustin Ligné-Collard, who is a dancer, choreographer, and also a professor that goes to many countries in Africa, but also in Europe and the US. Faustin works from Kisangani, and he has a space, a studio called Kabako, and in his work he has gone back to history of the DRC, and that's what led him to go all the way from Kinshasa to Kisangani. And he has many productions. One of them is Spectacularly Empty, Festival des Mensonges, that is taking us back to the story of Congo all the way to the installation of Kabila and a return to Kisangani, and then you have more and more future that talks about this country that is experiencing suffering and even death. And Faustin will tell you more about it. Over to you, Faustin. Thank you very much. Thank you, Achille. Finally, we succeeded in doing it. I am at the Atelier de la Pensée. Thank you, Felwin, and to the whole team that made this possible so that we are gathered here. yesterday in his presentation, Tangla Boni talked about the necessary separation to build bonds, and this relates to me because as a dancer, I need to create this vital space, and it needs to be sufficiently clear so that I can bond with other bodies that are in the space with me. So it's about precisely identifying my position in the space, and from there determine where the other is, but most importantly what I can do with regards to the distance between us. Will I try to fill it, or on the contrary, will it be to move away from that body, which means that the relation is something that needs to be negotiated. The us is always under negotiation, and that might be the reason why when I went back to live in the DRC 20 years ago, this sort of relationship or bond is of interest to me, and I perform on that because I did not want to take the circle as something given, because when I go to the village we have this circle to dance. But I said that this is not God-given. I'm coming back home after 10 years and I need to show my relatives in front of my mother, for instance, here is your son. And beyond memory, beyond sound, is there something else on which we can build a future together, a possible future? And it seems like being on the scene, it's like accepting that from separation, I should take up this responsibility to rebuild the circle. I often say that the scene, the Italian way, was somebody who decided to come with scissors and cut the circle and put the two lines in parallel. And my role as a dancer is to give us the possibility to reshape this circle. So when I'm in front of you performing, even in this relationship we have, it's about reconnecting to each other, but also negotiating this possibility because it's never God-given. But maybe before coming before you, I need to reconnect with myself. I have this circle around me. And that's why when Felmin, who was kindly asking me a title for my presentation, I said, my body will be an attempt to remember my name. My dance will be an attempt to remember my name. Somehow to build the us, to make the circle, I need first and foremost to start with the I and understand where I'm situated in the space. Is it in my body? Is it circulating enough so that I can be connected to the other dancer and we can build another space so that I can be connected to those who are looking at me, whether they are sitting or standing? So there are other bodies in front of me. So how do we connect? Now, what is fascinating about the us is that the us is both this small, tiny little thing that tells us who we are, but at the same time, when you look closely with the us, you cannot fall into an I, because it's not possible. Because with the us, we have a network of relations. connection to history, geography, people. If I tell you that Lignecula is my last name, my family name, thanks or because of colonization, you'll tell me that Lignecula is not from Belgium. Yes, I know, but before the 30s, family names did not exist. We all had our names, but it was not because we didn't have the same names that we couldn't connect to places, families, clans. In the 30s, the Belgium introduced the tradition of family names, and my grandfather, whose name was Lignecula, who didn't have brothers or sisters whose name were Lignecula, decided to establish the Lignecula family. So this is how I became Lignecula. An anecdote to remember, because I'm not teaching you anything new. It's just about remembering. Names are not innocent. Names open this network, and if you feel present with your name, really present, if you're present every day when you see things moving, you can only be or remain alert. Permanently, you remain alert. Where am I? Where do I stand today? And from this place where I start reconnecting with this name, knowing that it's never God given and you need to continuously reactivate it and update my relationship to the world. Now, how to reform this circle? And this is where the dance circle becomes an incredible school for me, because it's never, as I said, God given. We have to reunite to decide to get into the circle, the dance circle. For it to function, we need vital spaces for each and everyone, because otherwise we are too close to each other and it doesn't work because the energy is not spreading. We know that the circle is also the space where the energy going from my right shoulder will come back at my left shoulder. And as a dancer, when I go to the center of the circle, I take the responsibility for the circle to continue. And this taking responsibility with regards to the space is essential. We could say, I don't know if it ever existed in history, we could take the circle as the ideal of a community where there is a solidarity. It doesn't exist in Kisangani or DRC where I live. But once the circle is broken, or if I say that it has never existed, the most important for me here is to know what I'm going to do regarding this. How do I take my responsibility so that I make this circle exist again? And maybe this notion of responsibility regarding this circle that led me to start this journey that started 20 years ago when I decided to go back to my country after spending so many years abroad. In 2001, I returned, and my family members thought I was mad for doing this. Why was I coming back? You should have stayed there for the family, for Western Union. But coming back with this idea that this is where it makes sense, the stories that are giving me experience because I do not have much imagination. So I'm trying to be alert to listen to what is happening around me and use those small objects for my performances, and put a little bit of poetry in it. I decided to come back to the DRC, and I realized that nobody's doing the work I'm doing. And then I said I have the choice of doing solos all my life or create a platform and share the space with others. And that's how this project was born. Uh, Les Studio Kabako, the Kabako Studios. Not because we have so many studios, because when we were in Kinshasa, we didn't have our own space. But Kabako Studios are not a physical space, it's this mental space where everything is possible. It's possible even in a country like ours. You can continue to dream in this mayhem, but with this conscience of what am I doing with these debris. In Lingala, in Kinshasa, we say Mamba no Kili. We never give up. We never give up. So after 5 years in Kinshasa, with the Kabako Studios, after 5 years in this city, this big city, we decided to leave and go to Kisangani, which is a smaller town. Kinshasa has about 15,000 inhabitants, and Kisangani 1.5 million inhabitants. It was deliberate to move from the capital city, the hyper-centralization of life in this city, because you feel that outside of Kinshasa there is no life, and even for the civil servants to be sent to Kinshasa with the same salary seems to be a promotion, even though his life will be harder there. And this challenge was to see if from Kisangani we could imagine something different. We could dream from a peripheral space because it's very complicated to circulate. There are no road infrastructures, but we were striving. At Kisangani, we didn't want to have a centralized place. And this reminds me of a conversation with a German architect that lives in Vienna. Her name is Babel Müller. She was talking about architecture as acupuncture. Architecture could serve or should serve as points of acupuncture in the city, and it's the circulation between those points that something can happen. And if I left Kinshasa because I didn't want to centralize my activities, we would just choose a space somewhere to store our equipment to work, but our scene will be the city. Being in the city and having the city as our scene, we go to some neighborhoods, and on the left bank of the river, it's a city that is cut into two by the river. In Kisangani, the river is part of the city, and on the left bank, that's where I grew up. And we have about 350,000 inhabitants, and we work there regularly. That's my village. That's a part of Kisangani where I'm being told stories about my grandfather. So it is important that I'm in that village, in my village, and we realize that there is no running water. To work there, we have to come with bottles of water. And this notion of responsibility, once again, regarding the circle, there are water problems. We do not have water. What do we do? with friends, Barbel Müller, this architect that was talking about acupuncture. We had a project with the students in urbanism, and we carry out a study on the situation of water at Kisangani. We had a lot of water there because it's not the Sahel. If you dig 3 meter underground, you find water, but we need to have access to some water that will not make us fall sick. And the most expensive is not to have potable water. The most expensive is to distribute water. And we said we wanted to have a small entity, a small structure to produce for our own use, but if we want to scale it up for 1,000 people, we will have that. But it's not distributed freely because we're not doing charity here. We established a structure. We discussed with people to ask what was the fair price for 1.5-liter bottles, and that's why today water is being distributed. So we've been talking about the Kabako Studios as a source where you can find water for your body, but also water for your soul. When you come to a concert, for instance, a movie screening or a dance performance, in this project on water, it was not part of a master plan, but we wanted to cater for our needs immediately and see what we could do. And this project seems today to be the key for a question that I've been having in my mind for so many years, which is the hyperdependence, the economic hyperdependence regarding Europe and the US. The work is carried out on the continent, but for it to be economically competitive, we need to turn around and around, and it's tiring. And I'm wondering how long will I continue? And this is not connecting me to the extractive industries. It just seems like I was another mine. I was exporting raw materials, and for value to be added to it, it had to be exported to the US or Europe. And thanks to this project with water, and especially after COVID-19, because for 15 months we didn't have any revenue, we thought that there could be something we could do.
6 prochains mois.
And we said our challenge for the next 6 months would be to produce water for 1,000 people and then increase it. And then we thought maybe this would be a beginning of our solution to this economic problem. I travel a lot across Kisangani, outside of Kisangani, and I found Papa Anna Bouton, a drummer, a master drummer. Anna Bouton means no buttons. It means when he starts playing, all his buttons scatter. And I said, Papa, when you used to play, were you able to survive from your art? And he started laughing. And he said, playing the drum is not a job. I had my fields, I had my livestock, and that's what sustained me. But when I played, and people gave me 2 goats, I liked it, but I played not for that. I played because I needed to play. I played because there were people around me who needed my drum. And I said, what does this teach me? How can I build something from that thought to continue to negotiate my place in this circle, which is maybe broken, but which is not dead. And if each and every one of us shoulders their responsibility, they can be reborn from their ashes. in the everything was broken in our country. When I tell Sonny Labutansi, that people were always there, and we called them master swimmers. They were there because they continued to swim. Thank you.
Un grand merci à
Thank you very much for Faustin Lunyokula, who deserves the name of his ancestors. And Faustin talks about a lot of bonds he made in Kisangani, and he said the cycle may be broken, but it's not dead. And one of the gaps he has filled was in Kisangani, where he became part of those artists who continue to work with others in the region, in the Great Lakes region. Rwandan artists come to work in Kigali, and they enable the Great Lakes region to beat with one heart. Thank you very much for that, Faustin.
ce qui nous rapproche évidemment.
Which, among other things, draws us close to Rwanda. I have the pleasure now to present a lady of the scene, a compatriot, a Rwandan artist, Carol Karemera, who is an actress both in the theater and cinema, but also a director, film director, and who established a cultural center called Issue Art Center, where she does a lot of work. It's at that center they receive many artists. They have a Mandela library, and at the center of many other activities culturally. But also she did a lot of transmission, taking care of some artists, some of whom have come here to play in Kesho. And she created the dance festival Keshpad. And she's a musician. She's a great saxophonist. And among her works, one of the most famous is a 1994 play where she acted in the character of the Virgin Mary. And about cinema, she also was in Sometimes in April by Raoul Peck. She played in that film. And we read a text by Felwin Sarr called We Call It Love. She was also with her friend and colleague Cécile Kakonda in Murmure and Little Kesho. And she also organized Kina Festival in Kigali. You have the floor. Good morning. First of all, I will not thank Felwin and Achille, because I don't know whether they were in the same condition as me. I was sad when I went to bed. No, that was of course a joke, but let me thank them for bringing us all together during these 3 days enables us in our doubts, our questions, and despair to talk to each other. And I work in Kigandia. I work in a Kisho. Kisho means a herd. So I also take care of livestock. I'm in a group of 8 women. 8 represents infinity, but in my country it also means inheritance. And some of these women are journalists and lawyers and sister artists. And for 15 years we have been thinking about the place and role of art in a society that is being reconstructed, rebuilt in Rwanda and in our sub-region. And we are trying. To talk about this topic, I was traumatized at the idea of being brought by Felwin to communicate with you. You are all writers and experts in your own fields. I have my passion. I want to talk about the bond, especially about 2 things that are important for us. First of all, how with our art we take care and we build bonds. The words of Benekri, he says, it's better to be invisible. And he lived a better life when he was invisible, and he did not know he was born invisible. His mother also, and that he could see. And living a pleasant life on the farm, looking up to the sky invisibly. Only things that survived that time were legends and rich traditions, unwritten ones, but which had to be remembered. We remembered them because we experienced them and grew in a period where we wrote nothing. And as a boy, he dreamed of taking care of cattle, and he became a cattle boy. And it's in books that he learned something about invisibility, went back to look for his people and to narrate everything that he had learned that he did not see in his young age. And he was so moved that he decided to leave this country to see what other people looked like. And he discovered his recent invisibility and forgot his dream to become a hard boy. And for him, the obscurity confirmed his invisibility in the universe. And he went to the nearest port and traveled. And he did everything, learned many languages and learned many forms of silence. And he listened to everything silently, listened to the sounds of nature, traveled across the seas to many cities, and saw a lot of evil in the hearts of men. He spoke very little, and when people asked him why he was traveling, he always said 2 things. The first, for the person who asked the question. The second one, for his own hurt. The first said, I don't know why I travel, I don't know where I'm going. The second answer was, I travel to learn why I am invisible. I am looking for the secret of invisibility. And those who worked with him over years, they thought he was naive. Actually, they didn't see him at all. This issue of invisibility is a question that exercised my mind in my first few years as an artist in Europe, because our practices, our culture, the way we see the world is invisible. And I became an artist, I think, to find out why I was invisible. And I came back to the continent to find out who the invisible people are and in a community with other visible women, judges, lawyers, etc., we are thinking about this part of invisibility, which is everywhere. On the hills, yesterday we talked about the souls of the dead, invisible to the heart, and that cannot be understood, nature, etc. So, and to illustrate this question of the invisible people, we look at those people who are caring for our societies, and this invisibility started from a group of young Rwandans, because we receive a lot of refugees, terrible figures and stories of modern slavery, people escaping from that. And Rwanda engaged, committed to receive 30,000 refugees. And among the young Rwandans, including myself, we looked at the invisible part of our humanity. And we just wondered why we don't have a place elsewhere. So we tried to reconstruct, and in a way, all that work disappeared. And we said, well, maybe we should look back. Maybe human beings just lose their memory naturally, and even where we try to repair, we see that this work is endless. What we are doing is an endless task, and we try to find why these young people, and these young people especially, are not so open to history, and why this issue of security, because we are a very secure country in Rwanda. There's very little theft there. But in that, paradoxically, security kills. We are proud to be Rwandan, as if we were ashamed 20 years ago. But there's also this arrogance. And we have that shell that seems to protect us from everything else. And we try to work with people who are invisible. And we said, who are the current invisible people in our society? Rwanda is okay, GDP is up there, and we work 50 hours a week. And the issue, question, who are these invisibles? What the European media call modern slaves. I think Nadine talked about this segment of our society. And the issue of domestic workers is very present. We are a society that is very law-oriented. We talk a lot about justice for vulnerable people, health for everything, women's rights, laws against rape, etc. And we are rebuilding our society, and we need to keep at it constantly. But for domestic workers, nothing. So we went to meet and talk to a lot of people. We did a lot of cross-cutting issues, human rights issues. We went to talk to the minister, etc., and said, why are we not taking care of these people? It was very uncomfortable to talk about that, because we're all workers after all. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who we rely on when we are sick, when we travel. They take care of our children, our mothers, when they are ill, etc. But we don't see them. Nobody talks about them in our laws, not in the labor code, in nothing. They are not considered vulnerable because they're invisible. So we worked on that issue. And these are so many issues that remind us constantly of our vulnerability. And in this exchange about care, we talked with a lot of people working in our houses, some in very comfortable houses, and they earn up to 65 euros, comfortable compared to those who earn 15 euros in the rural areas, because we live with these people and we looked at the conditions of life, and we realized over 10 years with the Kesho women that nobody sees them. Yet they are always present there with our children. They open the car doors, they wash everything in our house, etc. But it seems that they tried to be transparent wherever they were there. They are taught not to talk before answer back. Will come up in the morning, and the first thing is that we shout at them, we give them instructions, etc. Over 10 years, from 10 hours a day. So we wonder what is happening. How come we are so aggressive against them when they have done nothing wrong? And they wondered, they asked us the question themselves, and we walked with them, we talked with them, and we walked with these comedians, so they worked in stories where they themselves started giving instruction, go find me milk, bring me this, bring me that, etc. And we realize their lives. They explain to us when they are sleeping, they are woken up, when they are bereaved. We don't care. They go for a couple of days and we are in a hurry for them to come back to work. So we did a lot of exercise with them, and we'll ask them their birthdays of their children, etc. And ask them, they told us a lot of stories about their lives. And we built these links with these people who were our carers. And it was extraordinary. And I think we're scared to think about this because it's so vast. These are such important things. Environment, ecology, etc. We hear the sounds that we don't want to hear anymore because of our fear. But our art enables us to dig deeper in spirits and people's hearts and enable others to link up with us and allow ourselves to form bonds with them. And otherwise we are overwhelmed. We lose our way. And so we did this work with them, about 25 young and less young domestic workers with many artists. And it was uncomfortable because we artists, we say, okay, we are good listeners, we observe, etc. We are very arrogant in that sense. And then we realized, actually, that we hear, we listen, but we don't hear. Even playing their part, putting ourselves in their skin, wearing clothes like theirs is an imposture. Because we invited people to come and see, everybody felt a deep sense of guilt. A businessman said, okay, I'm doing some microfinance, maybe I can ensure that they pay in for their own benefit, because if they don't exist economically, we all know that you do not exist. If you earn 25 euros per month, you do not exist. We have tontines in our countries, but it's in decision-making fora that these people need to find themselves in. So, as a judge, who is a president, said, there is a legal vacuum here that we need to address. These are very sensitive questions. What should we do to make these things visible? Not wait until it is too late. Wait for a worker to steal or to kill the mistress because he's had or she has had too much. let us not wait for such moments. Let us not be deaf anymore to the plight of this invisible part of our society. I think this makes us all fragile. It is work which is very uncomfortable. We asked, are the comedians, the actors, going to do it? How are we going to continue this conversation with these people, with lawyers, with human rights people, defenders, etc.? How on a daily basis we can change things. This is an exercise that occupies us on a daily basis. And when I came back home, I bought a beer for my watchman, for example. It was the first time I did that. This was a person I saw but didn't, I looked at but didn't see on a daily basis. And then we have to ask them to come in to our houses, not to just serve as our watchmen to guard us when we sleep, or tell them, if your family comes, you must go through the back door. That's what we normally do to them, to make them visible. It's very difficult. We need to be bold enough to realize that the structures that we ourselves put in place, which are so violent, should be more open, more humane, so that they can be visible. And the second activity that I conduct with a friend, Valerie, who is in this room, I asked her to come. She didn't know why, but I said, okay, this is how the ateliers work, and I want you to come to see what is happening. So for the past 2 days, I've been talking to her, and she's beginning to understand. I know you love me, by the way. You don't mind. But with Valerie, for 15 years now, we work. She works in Chevrons, I work in Kigali. These are two very different places. So we work in very different territories, but we want to listen to everything that's happening, and we have been working for years on different things in and outside of the theater. And we talk about diplomacy, cultural issues, and we have different answers. But we became a friend because in our living room one day she said, be careful, because this is part of the universe for which you are responsible. I didn't realize exactly what she said. It was a certain bond that existed and which crystallized at that moment. And we worked on a lot of things. And we decided to work on the question of our bond to nature. We created Kesho to understand our realities, because in 1973, working in a very urban area where people lived superimposed on top of each other, and different from the hills of Rwanda. When you are in the center of France, takes part in COP26, and in the green city concept, etc., find you are all victims of the same thing. When you come to Sevran and Kigali, young people do not hear the sounds of the world in the same way, and we all run the same risks.
Donc on a abordé ce travail.
So we started this Kesho project, this transversality project, and we work with what we call expert citizens, experts of their own territories, to see what is really scaring them in this issue of environment, what why is it difficult to take into consideration the ecological issue? Why are we trying to fill our minds when we do not have the time? So we worked with a group with Mr. Latour, a group that has experts in politics, experts in biodiversity, musicians, etc., that have a cross-cutting approach. And the diversity in the territories where we work, we have this pilot phase on 2 different territories where we have our ecologists that were looking for solutions at small scale, because working at scale is very important. So to find less polluted solutions regardless of their economic means, because those who are on the social ladder at the lowest level are the ones that feel most the pressure. So people who choose to organize dinners for those who do not have means. So the solidarity process for people who have less. And we had the same experience in Rwanda, young girls taking waste, plastic waste, to create pavement for. So in this project, we were trying to see what people were doing, discussing, starting this dialogue to see what it tells us about our societies, these concepts that are imposed on us to think about our environment and what from our environment we can take to inspire others. Direct environment, but also cultures. Valet Valnemer, when she will go home to put in place Rwanda, that's that kind of project. So in Rwanda, we learn also from the other side with the groups that are being formed, like Watehi, Gong, politics experts from political science that come out of their academic spaces to work with people in research workshops. So these are research workshops, shows. So this issue of porous frontiers, barriers, decentralization, etc. Those are things that inspire us. The same goes for the territories. You have the movie already, Banya. Sometimes we are mad at nature for erasing traces, footprints. But as artists, we shouldn't forget this, because that's what we do. Our territories are not territories, virgin territories. And we come with our cultural practices to say that this is what we're going to do. Either you're a small association or anything else and you want to sow culture, not taking into consideration all the microorganisms and ecosystems that are supposed to feed us and teach us again what it is like to be an artist in a given territory. I'll stop here. Thank you very much, Carol, whose work is not easy. Work on a traumatized territory where the social bonds have been broken throughout the territory, and reminding us of this thing that we do not say enough for this traumatized society. There is this sort of infuriation that transforms itself into something that makes them sleep. So you work with artists so that those who have been hurt will consider the others, which is not quite easy. Listening to your different presentations, how do you fit into a given territory, Carol, in a country like Rwanda that has a peculiar territory, Faustin, in a country that is still at war, in the eastern part of the Congo area, and Autobahn. So a question that I could ask to you so that you try to answer. Is the territory constraining the artist in his production? Can he escape this to move away, go elsewhere, and explore other projects, subjects? First time I remember this debate we had in Johannesburg on the artist in his country and the possibility of going elsewhere. I know that you have worked on projects like Kumbanis that does not necessarily talk about Congo. So in the social bond, is there a place for other territories or the subjects? Honestly, it seems like wherever I go, I'll try to find a little bit of Congo. In 2009, I did Berenice French comedy, but in 2010, to finish with Beremis, I worked with Congolese comedians because it enabled me to question our relationship with language, French language, which is the language in which public life is organized in Congo. But in reality, we have 20% of the population that fully master the language. So, what does it mean to say that this country is democratic? Because that's our name, Democratic Republic of Congo. So when this democracy is organized around a language that excludes the majority, even when I was with the comedians in France, I was thinking about Congo, and sometimes I think that I should learn to do something else, but I don't know how. Can we say that this territory is constraining? No. If this connection with the territory enables me to better understand my position in the world, this is no more a constraint, but on the contrary, it's something that liberates me. Otobong, I'll try to speak French and answer in French. What I've realized is that we have so many things in common. And I look at different things, many things when I'm on different territories. I look at water, how water is crossing a territory. What are we eating? All the things that are around the human being. And from there, this gives me the possibility to understand how to enter the space, for instance, in Nigeria, I could work. It's an issue of network and also economy. Understand how different territories are working with a certain economy. For instance, when I'm in Bangladesh and I spend a month with Bangladeshis, so that those that are in settlement, those that are devising policies for the Bangladesh city, I learn a lot about water. It's an area that has been flooded for many years now, for centuries, and they understand how they can devise coping strategies, how they can adapt, and should they move with the flow and how. And when I'm in Nigeria and I look at a place like Makoko or where I come from, we are peoples of water and forests, and there are heavy floods there. And I'm interested in knowing if I settle there at the village of my father that borders with Cameroon, how I can think about this territory and how I can work there, considering multiple spaces and territories and how those are managed. And for me, it's a way of learning and being humble towards a situation. And this enables me to have a sort of open mindedness and understand this violence that has been that Africa has been subjected to. But when you look at Asia and South America and how it is the same sort of structure that you have around the world, and we are separated in thinking about that, but we are also together in this fight. And for me, it's interesting to see how these fights are carried out in different regions. The question of territories, yes, we have the geographical territories. We talked about broad borders that tell stories but do not tell enough. If we take the borders of our country between Giseni and Boma, it's from here to there. It's not a border, to be honest. It's the same country. So trying to make sense of what people call territories. What is interesting to me are the territories, the stories that are told around those territories and where they fit. The stories that we know now, but those that are in your DNA without you knowing it. Having traveled a lot and worked in many different cultural settings, we have this under our skins. We cannot change, we cannot mutate like snakes, but there is something that is itching under our skin, and we think that this is a territory that we have not explored yet. It's beautiful and so on and so forth. It's like a skin, and the more we are in contact, in resonance with people and bodies, because bodies are like sounds, because when we were at the Empire, your bodies were like an orchestra around me, and I'm like astonished because there are people that you meet, there are bodies that come together, and when bodies come together, there's another territory that is created of memory, life, history, cultures, and those territories talk to me. And what I try to do is to decode. It's not easy, but try to understand with other instruments what is the territory with which, when it's moving, has a specific body. I was telling Valérie yesterday that there were bodies that were coming from France and that had not landed yet. I think it was Vincent and the lady from 93. Their bodies have not landed yet. And that's why I looked at her and I asked her if she had slept well and if her body had joined us. So it's always interesting to consider these bodies and territories with which we have come here. We were moving, we are harmonizing a little bit in the bodies. It's not about rum or sleepless nights. It's another territory where you connect with your environment, and that's why I believe that whatever happens, you will live with some part of this territory, the stones and other things that you can live with. Can we go with the stones? Yes, thank you. Thank you all for presenting your different areas of work. We will now give the floor to the audience so that if there are questions, we have the roving mic circulating. A question here, Odile.
S'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, en tout cas un grand merci.
Thank you very much. A big thank you for this morning session, for all these sessions and nights. I'm very happy to be here. Happiness is important. Happiness to be together. And I'm coming to this question of being alert as a body, and this body that is alert to oneself and to others is interesting, because working with others, I have the impression that this alert body is in the emergency and is not resting, is not sleeping, and this space, this vital space, is difficult to conquer. And I'm questioning not just a dictatorship or military regime, but also a necessity to unlearn. I would want to connect and have my own vital space and be alert. And I have the impression that there is a necessity of learning, but also unlearning that should be done in what I was able to share. And I'm asking if this necessity to unlearn is to accept to let a little bit of vacuum so that we have a space for our memory. And this is a link to the movie we screened yesterday, this scene where the actor is reconnecting with his mother, grandmother, and there is a ritual and a performance you gave us where you somehow reconnect with your memory. And what struck me was this going back to your childhood. So before learning all the knowledge that is given to us and all the codes that we need to digest based on the context. So these are my two remarks. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. We always have lessons to learn. I do not have a question, but I cannot prevent myself from reacting. I understand your performance, Murmure, your show, Murmure, that we received at Ouagadougou, and it was an appeal at that festival. And I saw people coming out of the room crying, and I see the microcosm that Murmure, Cosmos is showing. It's a closed session, but there is a resonance on the invisible minority that this show was actually portraying. I think that artists should come off their pedestal and be simple or lay citizens. Let's not forget that we cannot transport our art in resonance on a scene, for instance, and the artistic aspect be at the center. Yes, we are artists. We have no other weapons. But what I want to say is that we also have to see ourselves as lay citizens, because we are living in communities. And as Césaire was saying, we are the voices of those who do not have a voice. We have this chance, this possibility of being heard. When we reach a certain level, we gain maturity and wisdom, and we are somehow listened to. And we need to be the representatives of those who do not have a voice, the voiceless, the invisible. And this is an appeal to the artists on the continent to be citizens before anything else, and their art be mingled with citizenship, so that they work on some subjects, topics that others wouldn't do. There are so many things to say. I'm so sensitive to this that please do not take this, do not record this. My house help, are you recording this? Because this is quite private. I wouldn't want this to be recorded. So this is off record. My house help that I received at home, I was not there when she was coming. Her mother died. She had a certain age. I was looking for a mature woman, not a young woman. And when I traveled, this woman came, and she was not the one supposed to come. It was supposed to be another one. She couldn't, and she looked for somebody else. She comes to my house, and she works for some time. And one day, I was with my mom, and she came to sit with us, and she said, "I'm HIV positive." It's a disease that we do not talk a lot about because you can be fired, because you might fear to be contaminated. But she saw in us some humanity, and she told us. And then my mother told me that when she was talking, I was a little bit, I wanted to react because her younger sister worked with a family of pastors, and they gave her a product, something. And they said that they didn't want to sell it. You have to share it, and in the long run, it eradicates the disease. And I said it was a good idea because she was already under therapy. And my sister came back from her travel, so I went to meet this couple of pastors, a center for social reinsertion, and I asked for the therapy. So she went on with her consultations, and she was also taking the medicine. And she didn't say that she had HIV before, but she was taken and accepted. And I knew that I didn't have enough means, but I wanted to pay her very well. Her husband was from a neighbor country. I will silence the name of the country. It's not Togo. So I'm quite sensitive to that. I was honored to receive an award, and going to that space, I had the possibility of inviting about 30 people, and I invited that woman because she had never been to a public space, and she came with me. She came along. So just to agree with you, let's be citizens. Let's be more sensitive than what is needed. Let us take some reactions from up there. There's a lady here who wants to take the floor. Thank you very much for your presentations. I'm a student. I'm mixed race, and you understand why I say this. I will start with 2 remarks before asking my question. We see that there's a loss of interest of the youth for local artistic forms. I come from the Reunion, and I see that Maloya is not danced anymore by the youth, so loss of interest. That is the first remark. And the second, as a young woman, I have to move around. I'm a mixed race. I've come from the Reunion Island. My grandparents from Vietnam, etc. So who am I? I'm not necessarily attached to a territory, and I cannot be attached to a specific territory. And from your presentations, I understood that art is related or linked to territories. So the belonging to territories, what form, artistic form is that? Sorry, I'm a little bit stressed. Now, who will be the artists of tomorrow? We, the youth, how will we be able to convey these forms of arts, because we are not interested anymore, and there is a loss of traditions when it comes to artistic representation. Thank you very much. We will take one last question to enable the artists to answer to the questions. So 2 last questions, please. This is more a comment. Good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, based on how you think. It depends. So, I heard the presentations around bonds that we're talking about. And from my culture, I am Paul. The worst thing that somebody could do is to cut ties, bonds, and you should try to rebuild those ties, and we call it jukut endam. And when you know the Pearl culture, Fulani culture, we have bonds with milk because the world has been created with a drop of milk. So this bond is not necessarily the one you have with your family, with human beings. It goes beyond, and that's what connects us to the ancestors, to our descendants that we have no knowledge of yet, and that's what connects us to nature all the way to stars, to avoid being poetic. And I was wondering how we could better use those bonds and how to connect to each other the best way. And you all shared your hotspots with friends. When you share your connectivity, you can broadcast this light. And I think that artists have this capability. They are conscious of this connection. And the more we go, the further we go, the more we dig deeper into madness. And it's something we have the ability to transform all this into light that can be broadcasted. And I think that with this stone that was shared, we are able to connect to each other. I'm sorry, it's a bit blurry what I said, but I hope you were able to understand it. Thank you. We have little time. With Fadel, two quick questions. Very quickly, please, in 2 seconds. 1 second, Fadel.
Oui, oui. Alors, non, non, vas-y, allons, vas-y, Fadel, c'est pas grave.
Okay, go ahead, Fadel. It's okay.
Je m'excuse, c'est parce que
I'm sorry because I tried since yesterday to ask a question. Thanks for the solidarity. I'd like to say thank you very much because you really talked at great depth that you cannot even imagine. I've been very sensitive I've been very sensitive to your very highly responsible gestures. You tried to do something from wherever you were located. But my question is about the kind of organization system we find ourselves, democracy, chieftainships, etc. And this circle gives us two kinds of responsibility, one that we assume and one that others think we have. So for a person to be part of the circle, he has to agree. And secondly, he has a certain responsibility within this circle. And you mentioned also what Nadine said. In giving and receiving, sometimes we take too much. And our institutions should also shoulder their responsibility. Well, how much can we take? Thank you. Yes, I'd like to ask you to, in very short time that we have left to answer, we need to manage the time. There's a second panel due to come. Somebody asked a question about an alert body. Faustin, can you say something about that? And issue of unlearning. Carol mentioned the need to take care of oneself in the middle of all this. It's a very difficult exercise. We are caught up in a whirlwind and we tend to forget. That is why it's important to have around us some people. Okay, it's enough for today. And for several years I've learned to tell myself that nobody will die if you don't do it. And if they die, well, that's it. Maybe they live in a place where we can afford to say it. Death doesn't seem to be strange. It's just death. How can we learn to take care of ourselves in the midst of all that? It's very difficult, but we've survived all these years because there are survival mechanisms. The point you say, I've had enough. I have to struggle to leave Congo from time to time, but that's a privilege. Being anonymous in an anonymous crowd like in Paris is different from my home, where there's always something to remind me I'm part of a circle with responsibilities. But even in Congo, I have discovered recently that I can withdraw. Kisangani is in the forest, but the forest is still there, although it is disappearing slowly. And from time to time, I take the car and go into the forest and listen to something else. And I agree with Odile here and say that you are in the society, part of a community. Living in Kisangani all the time, or as long as possible, my people relearn to see me as one of them and no longer somebody who brings solutions to their problems. My grandmother receives from her husband's retirement 1,000 CFA, which is 50 francs here. Because franga imwezi, the money for your grandfather for this month is for you. That's what I tell her. So she tries to give it to me. Thank you. We are never alone. Thank you, Faustin. A woman asked a question. We're not, we're not part of a territory, what do we do? I will answer in French. If I can't, I'll switch to English. Yes, it clearly. If I think about my trajectory, I left Nigeria at age 11 and came back to continue my studies, and then I went away for 20 years. But I don't feel that there is one final territory, one place where I feel 100% me. I have lived in Lagos. I was born in Kano, went to France, went to Antwerp in the Netherlands, and traveled elsewhere in the world. In 1 month, I find myself in 3 continents. So you have this notion of displacement, of not being attached to one place, and also to have several desires. When you find yourself in a territory, you feel that you can live there even if you are not part of the place. But at the same time, it's not just the territory, the land. It's everything around, such that it is possible to find a place you are attached to beyond the geography.
Of land, or as a way of thinking of attachment, or as a way of thinking of connection. So this can always move around with me as a way of understanding and being connected to a place, and that place is multiple. The stone is not necessarily from Senegal, but the stone is from all over the world, and it's from a place where the waters have washed it and grounded it for it to become. So I think that the way of thinking of territory is a way of thinking of it in the fluidity, as something much more flowing through places and flowing through things. And once in a while, we anchor ourselves to a place, and that place feeds us, and we feed that place, but that doesn't mean that's the final kind of place that it should be. But you could anchor to be able to grow. You could anchor to be able to love. You could anchor to be able to connect. But you can also take your body out of there. But it doesn't mean you've left it. You've left a trace, you've left a connection, and you're leaving a network. So that network is a very fundamental place and power to be able to navigate the world. So for example, if I need to meet someone, and there's a friend of mine, he's an eco-psychologist. When I need him in my life, I call him. But he's Australian, Brazilian, but he is like everywhere. But I hear his voice in many places I go. I hear his voice when I look at a tree, because he taught me how to hug and talk to a tree. So the territory is beyond land. The territory is a kind of memory. It's also something that slips through and within and beyond land itself. And that's the way I see and conceive the world, as a place that when you're there, you give it the 100 that you are. You give it, you connect to it, you're present. But within that present, you can think of the past and you can navigate for the future.
Merci, Otobang.
Thank you, Otobang. There were two speakers, Odile and another lady. There were more comments. Now, do we take the risk of alienating yourself just to receive others because you have learned too much to be open to others? I think we need a coffee break now. No, I don't know. I don't know at all. No idea. I take a lot of risks, yes, but I don't know. You alienate yourself? If I remember the words, do you take a risk of alienating yourself? Where are the limits? We talked about milk and this idea of responsibility. I get the impression that it's in the milk that we were given. As far back as I can go in my family and social interactions, that it was in the words of our parents, grandparents, and others. The sense of responsibility is shared. I don't think we shoulder it alone, but it is more risky to be irresponsible than to be responsible. That's all I can say. The image she gave about the pearls in Rwanda is the same. When you share responsibility, it sort of relieves you a bit. But when you are given a cow, thank you, Ashil and Felin, when you come back to Rwanda, I'll give you a cow. And as we do in tradition, the cow I will give them should be given to somebody else. So by giving, you are part of the other person's life. So responsibility, I don't think it's something we think about in time. I was born in 1975, and I think it's like traveling across time. No, there's no alienation. I don't feel it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carol, Faustin, Otobang. Thank you to all of you for your attention. We'll take a coffee break now, 15 minutes. Thank you.